Hello there, and welcome to this 5-part series video on the Nigerian Constitution. This video is the first of the 5 videos in the series. I am sure you have probably heard people sometimes blaming the Nigerian Constitution for some of the problems in Nigeria today and a need to change the Constitution. And the cry seems to be getting louder and louder. But despite this, a lot of people have never even read the Constitution or know what a Constitution is. I was one of these people, so I decided to educate myself. Got a copy of the Constitution online, and the copy I got had about 169 pages. Since not many people will sit down to read 169 pages of text, I decided to create these easy-to-digest videos to make it easier for other people to get familiar with the Nigerian Constitution. Because as Shai Reshef once said, when you educate one person, you can change a life. When you educate many, you can change the world. I hope you find this series educative and useful. Do not forget to click the like button and also do not keep to yourself. Spread the knowledge by sharing with your friends and family. So, let's get right to it. This video is the first in a 5-part series where we tackle different parts of the Nigerian Constitution. The videos are broken down into bite-sized information, so they are very easy to understand for everyone. In this video, we will be looking at the general structure of the Constitution and venturing into the Constitution proper by looking into its first chapter. So let's jump right into it. What is a constitution? Simply put, a constitution is the supreme law of a country. It is a written document that contains the basic principles and laws of any social group, whether it be a state, a country, or just a social group. A constitution also contains the power and duties of the social group's governing body and protects the rights of its citizens. Over the years, Nigeria has gone through a number of constitutions. During the colonial era, we had the Richard's Constitution of 1946, Macpherson's of 1951, and Littleton of 1954. There were also others published in 1913 and 1922. After Nigeria gained her independence, the Independence Constitution of 1960 was put into place. This constitution was later replaced by the 1963 Constitution, which established Nigeria as a republic. That is, Nigeria ceased to be under the control of the Queen of England. The next constitution was instituted in 1979, which put a pause to military rule and ushered in the Second Republic. However, this did not last because the military hijacked governance once again. A new constitution was then created in 1993 to usher in the Third Republic, but it was never instituted. The military continued to rule till 1999, when the current constitution in use was created. Moving on from that, let's look at the preamble. The preamble is the very first thing you'll see when you open the constitution. But what exactly is a preamble? A preamble is basically a formal introduction that explains the purpose of an official document, which in this case is a constitution. Think of it like the trailer of a movie. In the preamble of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, there are 3 purposes of the Constitution listed. 1. To promote good governance. 2. To promote the welfare of all persons in the country on the principles of freedom, equality, and justice. 3. To create unity of the people. After the preamble, you get into the Constitution proper. This Constitution is divided into 8 chapters, and I'll give a quick summary of each chapter. The first chapter just gives general provisions of the Constitution, while the second chapter talks about the obligations and objectives of the government, alongside the ethics and duties of the citizens. The third chapter is dedicated to expounding on citizenship, while the fourth chapter talks about the fundamental human rights. The fifth chapter talks about the legislative arm of government. The sixth chapter talks about the executive arm of government, while the seventh chapter talks about the judiciary arm of government. All the arms of government are discussed at both the federal and state level. The final chapter is dedicated to discussing the Federal Capital Territory Abuja and some other additional provisions. The body of the Constitution is also divided into schedules, 7 of them to be precise. The schedule is basically that part of the Constitution that explains fully the provisions contained in the chapters. Now, what exactly is contained in these schedules? Well, the first schedule talks about the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. The second schedule explains the exclusive and concurrent legislative lists. The third schedule talks about the federal and state executive bodies and also about the executive body of the Federal Capital Territory. The fourth schedule talks about the functions of a local government council, while the fifth schedule explains the code of conduct for public officers. Schedule 6 talks about election tribunals, while the seventh and final schedule talks about oaths. Before we run, let's quickly go through the provisions contained in the first chapter. The general idea of the first chapter is to help the reader come to terms with the supremacy of the Constitution and the identity of the country and its powers. As a result, one of the first things this chapter points out is the fact that nobody is above the law. The Constitution is supreme and is the only set of laws that the Nigerian state can be ruled by. Even a change in government has to be done in line with the provisions of the Constitution. Furthermore, this chapter spells out the name of the country and its 36 states, and it is clearly stated that the Federal Capital Territory is not a state but the seat of power. Also, in this chapter, it is stated that the Constitution recognizes 768 local governments and 6 area councils. Local governments form a state, while the 6 area councils form the Federal Capital Territory. In this chapter, we see that governance is divided into 3 arms, which are the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Federal legislative powers are vested in the National Assembly, and this National Assembly is divided into the Senate House and the House of Representatives. On the other hand, state legislative powers are vested in the State House of Assembly, and each state has a House of Assembly. Neither of the houses of assembly has the right to make themselves immune to the powers of the court. And when there is a conflict between the duties of the National Assembly and a State House of Assembly, the National Assembly will prevail. As for the executive arm, this chapter states expressly that federal executive powers are to be exercised by the President himself or through his vice, his ministers, or other federal public service officers. On the other hand, state executive powers are to be exercised by the governor himself or through his deputy, his commissioners, or other state public service officers. And lastly, for governmental powers, federal judicial powers are to be exercised by federal courts, while state judicial powers are to be exercised by state courts. This chapter also makes provision for constitution amendment. Nonetheless, the motion has to be approved by a 2/3 majority in the National Assembly and a resolution of 2/3 majority of all the state houses of assembly. However, if this amendment has to do with state creation, boundary adjustment, or fundamental human rights, there would have to be a 4/5 agreement in the National Assembly while the state houses remain the same. Furthermore, the Constitution forbids the country and individual states from adopting a single religion. And if for some dangerous reason a State House of Assembly cannot perform its duties, the National Assembly can step in. However, it does not have the right to remove a sitting governor or deputy. Finally, in this chapter, an international treaty, which is a signed agreement between countries, will only have the force of law when it has been passed into law by the National Assembly. And that is it for this video. If you found this informative, hit the like button and share with your friends. There are 4 other videos in this series and you do not want to miss them. So do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when the other videos in this series are released.